Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I think they've introduced me well enough. So thanks for that. I think I'm quite left-brained in everything that I do. So what I've done is to build a framework for you to use to evaluate whether you are ready to be a founder, right? Obviously, being a founder is far more than using any kind of framework. But what this framework does is to make sure that at least gives you some kind of a structure to the madness that is to make that first step from employee to entrepreneur, and hopefully over time be a really good entrepreneur at that, right? So let me get started. As I said, it's Friday night, so we should start with Dilbert. And I think for a lot of people, some point in their life, doing something in the corporate world gets to them. If you're one such person, I think at least you have ticked off a bunch of stuff that's required to get to doing a startup, which is really that urge to go do something in a completely 0 to 1 environment, right? Uh, this particular presentation and a lot of the content, while it may apply for people who are in buckets 1 and 2, it's more specifically for bucket 3. And what is bucket 3? All of you who ever want to do a venture capital led business, right? A lot of you might want to operate independently as a freelancer or as an independent consultant. A lot of you might want to do a bootstrap business, which is to not involve venture capital. The big difference between the three, of course, is in the first case, you're still working for someone else as a client. You're doing projects at your own pace. So it gives you a lot of time freedom. But yeah, you're still at the behest of your clients. In the second case, you're building a team, you're building an institution, you're building something which is hopefully profitable, but you're not using external capital beyond maybe debt to actually grow the business, which essentially means that you're going to be growing the business at a particular rate. It's extremely difficult to grow these businesses at an integer rate every year. It is possible to grow it at 30%, 40%, keep using the profits and refueling it into business. There's nothing right or wrong about it. There have been great businesses like of Zerodha, Zoho that you would see, which is in the second bucket. But what I'm going to be talking about, which is the only experience I have had, is to build a venture capital led business where you raise capital from venture capitalists who then take an equity stake in your company. The biggest difference there is not just your institution and your company that's going to grow massively or going to burst massively. It's also that you as a leader will grow massively. And the singular difference that I have seen of a venture led business is not just this crazy growth of the company, but you as an individual and as a professional are going to grow crazily, right? If you don't want to be that crazy growth professional who's going to undergo so many different experiences, from hiring, from self awareness, from managing a board, to managing multiple investors, to managing millions of customers, to doing new initiatives, to having the ability to deploy hundreds of millions of dollars. These are all huge responsibilities. Then you should not actually take on path number 3, right? So that's sort of what I'm going to stress on. I'm going to build a 10-point framework for you to sort of evaluate whether you're ready. So let's get started. The first one is 3 points on why you should be a founder, and on the contra, why you should not be a founder. The first one, which you would have realized, is a lot of founders have some level of a creative bone in them or a creating engine in them from very, very early. In your college, in your work, if you've just started working, you would have started creating something on the side. You just love the joy of creating. And when I say creating, it could be a solution, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be something which has impact on the lives of people, right? And that's something which is a phenomenal muscle, which you would, which would be tickling somewhere in your body to say that I have to create. The second one is, even if you have not been a creator, whenever you see a big problem statement for a particular set of customers, you want to go solve it. You are just not able to sleep without solving it. And this is a problem solving engine or a problem solving mindset that you're always kept awake at night on a particular problem. So you want to deeply solve this problem. The third is, of course, you want to leave a legacy. And you see a lot of movies, you see a lot of these inspirations, these podcasts. A lot of it has been about leaving a legacy beyond your time, because institutions which startups finally become are institutions beyond your time, and that's the whole purpose of creating this, right? Which means that you actually go after a large market and you not just solve a big need or create something from scratch. You also create a massive institution going after a big consumer statement or a consumer market, which essentially means these are the three very strong reasons. It doesn't mean that you have to tick off all three. It just means that the why of why you start up better be one of these three, if not at least two of these three. On the contrary, the why not, if work is not part of your very, very core identity, I don't think you should do a venture funded startup, right? If you want balance, if you want, lifestyle, if you want all of that stuff, doing a venture funded business is a very, very wrong idea, because it is so critical that you're going to be, literally every day solving obsessively customer problems, that unless work becomes your defining attribute, you're going to probably be a bad founder. The second is, just because you have a bad boss, do not start a venture backed company. Because I can tell you, in a corporate you have one boss and you have one painful boss. In a venture backed company, you probably have five bosses. Your investors are your bosses, your customers are your bosses, your team members are your bosses, your co-founder is your boss. You are answerable to just far, far more people than any one corporate job will ever make you answerable, right? So do not become a venture funded founder because of a bad boss, for sure. The last is, of course, money and fame and press coverage and being on the front page. All of this is fantastic. There's nothing good or bad about it. But the more you do it, the more it becomes meaningless. So it's great to have it. It's almost like an increment. You're happy for a week, you're happy for a month, but after that it just sort of dissipates the joy, right? It is the same with respect to all of this. And having gone through all of that, I can tell you that it is exactly that. For me personally, all of these three, 1, 2, 3 on the left hand column were ticked off. I used to create a lot of stuff in college, in IIT, in IIM, in Infosys. I always had that thing of creating websites. I had the largest website in Infosys 22 years back. I was quite a nerd. I started coding some 26, 28, 7 years back, right from my 10th standard. And 1990, I think 1994 holidays, my 10th standard holidays is where I started coding. And I think for the next 10 years, I was just glued to the computer and really built a lot of websites. So creation and creativity was always a big part of me. Same with the burning problem. For me, Ashish and me, it was about really solving a customer need which was acute, which is why we took on furniture at Urban Ladder to solve. We didn't take an easy category. We wanted to do something which was a burning problem, and we wanted to play in a large market. Even 10 years back when we started, literally to this month, the furniture market was approximately $20 billion annually in India. Heavily, unorganized, heavily fragmented, but it was a massive market nevertheless. So we felt that if we can solve this problem in a really strong way, we leave a strong legacy behind on being able to solve a strong customer problem. And I think we've done a pretty fair job in those 10 years where we created Urban Ladder. The second part is the how versus the how not, right? And three more sort of points for you to evaluate. The how of being a strong founder is to really be strong on something in your day job already, right? If you're not someone who is stand out in your company, if you're, at least in one skill, it could be engineering, it could be product, it could be marketing, you have to question whether are you ready. I mean, you could be a general good orchestrator, and there are lots of unicorn founders and decacorn founders who are good orchestrators. But typically, it'll be extremely important that you're very good in something. If you're very good in something, you will also dirty your hands, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But not just that, one aspect of your core work is something that no one else can take you for granted, right? Which essentially means you can push for excellence in that aspect of work, which essentially means all the new stuff that you have to do makes it that much easier. Same with developing a high quality of advisors. If you're very strong in some aspect of work, you're very well known in your company for that work, and your network will also be stronger. People will look up to you. Hey, this person is doing a fantastic job of product. If he or she becomes a founder, I really want to tag along with them, right? So having a high quality of network of investors, potential co-founders, advisors in your current setup, build that network when you don't need it, because don't go when you really need it, because you will not find the best of people. Build it when you don't need it, and when you actually need it, these people will come automatically. The last is, of course, something which is non-trivial and a lot of people take it for granted, which is to make sure that your personal situation across health, relationships, wealth is absolutely taken care of. If you are undergoing a very specific situation, let's say it's a very new relationship, either a spouse or a partner, or just had a kid, or if your bank balance is absolutely zero, you don't even have 12 months of runway at your current living lifestyle, or your health is broken, either physical or mental health, doing a startup at that point in time is quite a bad idea, because there's always going to be ups and downs. And if you have to handle all this at the time when your startup is going through ups and downs, it just becomes almost impossible for you to handle, which essentially means that at least there's a bare bones hygiene that you want to maintain on your health, on your relationships, on your wealth before you actually get into doing a startup. A good sort of a thumb rule on your wealth is 12 to 18 months of when I say current lifestyle. If you're holidaying in Italy, make sure you holiday in Coorg. If you're going for a drink every night, maybe do it once a week. But I think having enough of a bank balance for a 12 to 18 months runway with zero salary is a good enough thing, I would say, in this current market, because people can, as long as you're very strong in your particular skill set, you can always get back to a job after 18 months, right? In a macro good or a bad market. So this is sort of the how you approach it. Again, on the other side, the how not, as I said, don't be just an orchestrator. I think there are enough and more generalist orchestrators. To just do not have few VCs that can write or not write, because for all you know, the few VCs that might have already have other people that they have written a check for. So it's extremely important that you also spread your network as much as you have depth in your network. The last, as I said, is on the personal situation. Do not ever take anything for granted, because it's terrible enough that something is broken, but if you're consciously getting into doing a startup when something is broken, that's like the worst thing. Personally, for me, I was reasonably strong in product management after 10 years of experience. So it became much easier for me to actually learn marketing and HR, which also I ended up handling in Urban Ladder. Those are completely two new fields, but I think we did a terrific job, even though those were completely new areas. Same for Ashish. He had very strong supply chain experience, and then he had to learn furniture. He had to learn the physical product design, and we did a fantastic job in those areas also, because he was so strong in supply chain and finance. Same with the high quality of advisors. I think where we really lacked advisors and network was, of course, in the wooden, supply network, where we completely built from scratch. But where we actually had a lot of advisors and network was in the investing community, thanks to Ashish's prior experience, as well as the first set of customers were all absolutely our networks from our colleges, right? And we had built a very strong network in our colleges 10 years prior, for absolutely no extra benefit. We just were very out there. We just wanted to help people, and we were very well networked that way. Same with the personal situation. I think we made sure that for 18 months we were absolutely fine on us, core living expenses, then only got into it. There's nothing right or wrong for folks out right out of college or just in your first job getting into this. But if you can take care of that person today, of course, the capital situation is very different. You can raise capital much faster, much earlier compared to 10 years back when we made the jump. But nevertheless, I think a 12 to 18-month runway is a pretty good thumb rule. The last part is what versus the what not, which is you have to be super customer obsessed. You're going to spend a lot of time with customers. You're not going to be just sitting in a conference room and thinking this is the right product based on secondary research. You'll have such a hard fall if you do it. Even when you do this amount of time with customers, I think it's you're going to have a hard fall in more cases than not. That's why a lot of people, despite the amount of money, don't get product market fit, because they're just not deep enough in their understanding of customer sentiment, right? So stop doing the conference room thinking. Make sure that you're spending enough time with customers. In our case, for example, we did hundreds of customer research before we started Urban Ladder. And these were people outside of our own network, because friends are usually very comforting, and people just want to help you. So they tell the things that you want to hear. So I would say this should be real customer research beyond your own immediate network. Second is building with your own hands. And as I said, unless you're very strong in something, you can't do this, right? If you just become a delegator or a manager, you probably are going to suck at this. The first set of product requirements document literally everything on the PRD, the UX design, the first merchandising design, the first policy, the first values, vision, everything was written by Ashish and me personally, right? Same on the first finance rules and on the product, on the operations engine, because I think it's extremely important to dirty your hands, especially in the first 6 months of your startup. You're probably going to be just the two of you as co-founders, or maybe a 3-4 member team. So if you're not dirtying your hands, you're probably not worth it being an early stage founder. The last is, of course, you're going to also be pitching to a lot of people through your life, starting at the very, very early stage. So if you're meeting a lot of well-intentioned people, just make sure that you get a lot of feedback from them, because I think it's extremely important to get that feedback. This feedback will help you refine your pitch. This feedback will make you maybe think from a different angle. It might alert you to a competitor that has been funded. You have to just make sure that you architect some of this and get these inputs from a wide variety of people, as long as, of course, you're not just doing that, but just buffer for enough time on that. Same, as I said, I think these inputs go a long way in making sure that your pitch is much stronger and it attacks questions from multiple angles. These are 3 into 3, 9 points. I have one last point, which is very strong self awareness and handling failures. There are 3, 4 other points that I've mentioned here, which also are things that you have to take care of, which is make sure that you engineer or your serendipity. Make sure that you have very strong resilience in driving through walls. If you're working somewhere today, you probably will be known as a pain in your job because you just want to solve something, right? That's actually a good founder attribute. If you're known as a pain, not by paining people but by getting something done, I think that's a great founder attribute. Assume that you're going to have lots of ups and downs and a lot of sacrifices. You today, if you're a very balanced life, work, relationships, health, fun, assume that you're going to give up at least two of those four, right? Unfortunately, you should never give up health, which essentially means that at least allocate half for it, which means that maybe you can do one more thing, which is maybe have a relationship or have a kid or something to that effect, but pretty much write off everything else, travel and Netflix and all of that stuff, because you just will not have the time. I've never seen founders, great founders, do anything less than 60 to 80 hours in the first 1 or 2 years of their startup journey, right? It just is almost impossible, which essentially means that you hardly have 20 to 30 hours on every other aspect of life. And you have to eat, you have to take a bath. So, it gives you very little time for any other aspect of life. So, I think just make sure that you're ready for those sacrifices. Last but not the least, of course, good old plain luck is also important. There's too many of these which you just cannot predict. And the point about self-awareness and handling failures is, if you have not had a failure in your job, I would actually go to the extent of saying do not start up, because you're going to fail so many times in your startup that if you've only had highs in your career for the last 6 7 years, do not start up. You should have had failures. You should have fallen flat in a safe environment, because you're going to be falling flat bang in the middle of the entire world, right? When you do a venture funded startup, you would have raised money, you're going to have layoffs, you're going to have customers not being happy. So make sure that you have failed so that you can handle this journey far, far better. My last point on this, of course, is if you ever thought that you're going to be a 10 on 10 and then you will start up, assume no human being will ever get to a 10 on 10 on this. You're going to start when you are not fully ready, right? And the idea with not fully ready is, I've just put the same 9+1 points in just a framework where you can evaluate yourself. The idea with this framework is not to say if you're a 20 or a 30 on 100, you are not ready, or you're 80 or a 90 on 100, you are absolutely ready, because the truth is somewhere in between, right? The idea with this framework is to say, hey, if you're a 20 or a 30, consciously make sure that you're moving towards a 70 or a 80. Some point in that journey, you will know when it's right, because at the end of the day, that final call is a very, very, beyond reason call, because it's one of the biggest calls that you take in your life. Just make sure that you move this course, because all of these aspects will only help you in your startup and to maximize the chance of success of that startup. There is already a 90% plus chance of failure of your startup. And the idea with doing these well enough is to maybe move it 5 6 percentage points. That's it, right? But those 5 6 percentage points means that you increase the chance of your success by 50%, right? And that's really what you're trying to do by doing all of this way before you start up. So, that's sort of the content. I'm going to spend just 2 more minutes on Antler India and the residency. I think the job of the Antler India residency is to make sure that your movement from where you are today, if you're sort of working somewhere or you've just started your company, to your day zero, especially if you're working somewhere, is extremely smooth. There are obviously some big calls that you have to take, which is what space you're getting into, who is your right co-founder, what is the initial research that I want to do to validate my own belief in this, that whole big decision of quit versus not quit, and how much is my bank balance. And I can only tell you one thing: when you cross all these previous ones, these ticks, the midday you make it official on your LinkedIn, or the day you quit your job and make it official, from a product manager or senior product manager at Razorpay or Swiggy or one of these unicorns, to saying founder of ABC, that kick is unparalleled, right? The framework here is to just make sure that you're on the right track before making that decision. But the day you make that, that's called day zero in our parlance, is a very special day. And just make sure that you celebrate that day. We would love to celebrate that with some of you. So what we are doing with the Antler India residency is, it's a 3 month program. where the core of it is to help you find a co-founder. So if you're a business person, help you find a tech co-founder. If you're a tech person, help you find a business co-founder. The idea is that, of course, there are 4 5 very specific interventions we do. One, we help you define your vision, your insights far sharper. Two, we help you go deep into your personality assessment, because that's what helps you realize as to what your strengths, what your weaknesses, what kind of a personality you are. We also make sure that we pair up with the right person, who's aligned with the business idea, who's aligned with your personality, and then do real life projects, because one is to align with personality and vision, but there is also an important part which is to align with working styles, right? Or even at least discover different working styles. So a big part of the residency is to also align people with working styles. Fourth is to work on your communication, because business folks and tech folks talk very different languages. And if you've not really interacted as much with tech folks or vice versa, I think it's important for you to make sure that that frequency of communication, as well as the language of communication, is the same. So we work a lot on that aspect as well. The last, of course, is we get you ready for the pitch, right? At the end of the 3 months, let's hope you're found your co-founder. Let's hope you arrived at something which you align as the space at which you want to go. You're still at a concept level in 3 months. You have not really built out anything. You're going to present to the Antler India investment committee for a pitch, and we want to make sure that that process is as smooth as it can be. And hopefully, some of you, many of you, we will fund 270K for 9% of your company at a 3 million valuation, and work with you over the next 6 months after that, from October all the way to March, to help you raise a seed round anywhere from $2 to $5 million from any of the top seed VCs in this country. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. Applications for this top month end. So you have another exactly 10 11 days to go. It's, I think, till the Tuesday after May 31st. We've already gotten 1,600 plus applications. We've already rolled out our first list of around 6 7 offers also, but there is more. Obviously, we do expect another 1,000 applications or so in the next 12 days, and we have another 50 plus offers to roll out. So if this is a program that makes sense for you, please do apply. I will end with a Dilbert, the way I started with a Dilbert, which is, obviously, this is one of the biggest calls that a lot of people take. We also provide a stipend of 3 lakhs over the 3 months, just to ease this for you. I will leave it at the framework for the next 5 minutes, and Balian, we can go through questions.
Yeah, absolutely. As people sort of think about the questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. I have a few questions that I'd sort of already received.
Sure.
Considering a few people last minute weren't able to join, it being a Friday.
Sure.
The first is a lot around social impact, right? So the entire debate about for profit or for impact as startups. So at Antler, and you can answer it for the organization or for yourself, how do you look at validating ideas, and do you sort of distinguish between for impact startups, for profit startups? Is there even a distinction to begin with?
There is, and there is, to be honest, we focus on for-profit startups, right? And I'll be honest, right? Because the not-for-profit is a very separate sector. It requires very separate intervention. The likes of, Give India and what Atul is doing, Atul Satija, they do a fabulous job at this, right? They are just far better suited to understand those kind of businesses, to help those kind of businesses, to fund those kind of businesses. It's a very different kind of capital. So we are very focused on for-profit businesses. That's what we understand, and that's what this fund is about.
Got it. The next is around leadership. So there's obviously a shift that you mentioned, that you go from being a builder for yourself to building for people around you, and the example of the websites you were talking about. How do you transition even in terms of your thinking as a leader? And is there something that, say, the program, or is there a framework that you recommend for people so that they can start thinking about, say, building teams, looking at, I know in early days you do things small and then you scale them, but even as you do those early days, how do you shift your perspective from that of an employee to that of a leader?
It's a very fair question. And honestly, before Urban Ladder, I had managed, at my peak, my direct reports, the highest was 2 people,
Yeah.
right? As a head of HR at Urban Ladder, there were 1,300 people at one point in time, right? So, you obviously learn by fire at some level. And personally, I think there are only two, three core things which I believe that every leader should take care of, right? And, I'm not going to do a leadership masterclass here because there is enough and more content out on the internet. There are enough and more books on the internet. But I'll tell you at least the three things that I operate on. One, you genuinely want to make people succeed. Okay, which means that when you move into being a coach, when you move into giving feedback, when you move into planning their careers, when you really do feed, the one-on-ones and stuff, you have to make sure that, and this is a very genuine thing, you're not looking at people as resources. And this is my personal beliefs. I'm not saying there's any particular school of leadership. One, you genuinely want to work with people and make people succeed. That's the first one. If you're an individual contributor and you hate working with people, doing startups is a bad idea. I mean, the venture funded startups is a very, very bad idea there, right?
Mhm.
So that's the first attribute, right? And I personally I'd always loved working with people, even though I had not managed as many people, right? So that's the first one. Second is, how do you as a leader communicate alignment of vision, values, and strategy, right? Because that's the huge second one. Because it's one thing to just tell two people that this is our vision, this is what we're going after. It's another thing to talk about that with five senior folks. It's another thing to talk about that with 50 and 100 folks. So you are, as a leader, just over communicating. You're just at it, right? In terms of clarity of, you have to over communicate at 150% for the last in line to hear it maybe at 60%, right? So you're going to be very strong on communication, evangelizing, and over communicating. The third is the ability to build institutions, right? Which means that you're always thinking about, okay, what kind of a resourcing do you need? Where is a fire? Where is overcapacity? So it's almost like, at the end of the day, you're getting this huge jigsaw puzzle that you got to paint beautifully as an institution. And you're sort of moving, someone is underperforming, someone is taking on a bigger challenge, someone else is overperforming. So how do you sort of align all of these sort of jigsaw puzzles, right? Every leader's job at the end of the day is to sort of at some level do these three. Okay,
Yeah.
it's a very oversimplified answer, but, and so if you are an individual contributor, and if you're if you want to know how to do this really well, you start doing this at small scale. You do this well enough for your own team of 5 6 people. Maybe you're a product person in a company, you're a marketing person handling 3 4 people. You start doing this within your sort of quote unquote small pizza, whatever, right? This is Amazon thing, right? So the moment you're able to do that well enough consistently, you sort of start managing bigger amount of people, and then you'll know when you're grooming as a leader. Make sure you're in the right organizations, because there are some organizations which don't do justice to the whole leadership, right? There's just a very mercenary approach to leadership. You hit your outcomes, you're a great person. You don't hit your outcomes, you're a bad person. That, at least personally for me, is not the way to build leadership or culture. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of literature out there, but for you to just make sure that you are managing a bigger outcome, a larger team, and just getting this ahead of doing your startup will only make you in a far stronger way. You will get feedback from your team for sure, right? The moment you start handling even one human being, you'll you'll get feedback from peers. And the more the number of people, the more they do really well, the better you are as a leader. It's a very simple philosophy there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love the point you mentioned about the minute you stop building just for yourself, but deriving outcomes through other people and with them. That's a good transition from being a builder to a founder, which a lot of people can think about. With that, I see Mohit has a question. Mohit, go ahead.
Hi, a pleasure talking to Rajiv. It was great to listen to the presentation. Happy actually to say that we are quite aligned at our stage, I guess, towards close to day zero. And I'm looking to apply in the next 10 days. I just wanted to understand on the website, it mentions two programs, the Preseed and the Residency.
Sure,
Could you
I'll
please
explain.
explain the difference between the two? Yeah, thank you.
So we do two things. We do three things. The third one is very specific to college students, so I'll keep that out. It's called the fellowship. Right now, we are not
Right.
actively recruiting for the fellowship, so I'll keep that out. The first thing we do is the pre-seed. So we have already done 20 investments actually. And there, if you've already found your co-founder, if you already have a founding team, and you've started working on your product, you should apply to the pre-seed rolling intake.
Got it.
Okay. There we come, we basically take it offline. It's a case by case basis. It's not a cohort program. We work with you over 15 days to understand more about what you do. We do conversations. We take you to our global partners meet, and then we make a decision, right? There we write anywhere up to 300 to 350K, and we keep the valuation a bit flexible there. Okay.
Okay.
So that's one of our core products basically. The part that I have discussed specifically today, which is what maybe you were talking about, is the Antler India Residency, which is pre-team, pre-product, which means that you are half a step earlier,
Right.
which means that you have not yet found your co-founder, and it is okay if you're already clear of your idea. In the cohort, 25-30% of people will come in with a clear idea and or would have already started working on their product.
Right.
70% of people will come with not either dabbling in multiple ideas or have not yet started up, right? So you could be at a stage where you've already started up, but you're very clearly looking for a tech or a business co-founder, and then this program makes a lot of sense. Here we have a cohort based approach. We will select as of between June 1st and June 20th. We've already selected some 6-7 people, but by June 20th we would have selected 60 people, approximately half tech, half non-tech. Between June 20th and September 20th is the program itself, of which you will find the details on the website, which is where we try and pair you with the right co-founder. On September 20th, you make a case for us for the investment committee, and there is when we decide whether we invest 270K at 9%. These are standard terms on the Antler India Residency, and by October 1st, you'll either have a check in your hand or we will wish you the best because we could not fund you. So one of the two will happen.
Got it. Thank you. I think we fall in the pre-seed bucket.
Okay.
We have the MVP on progress, and I look forward to apply. Is there should we drop anything other than the website or?
No, that's it. The website, it'll give you the right flow there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rajiv.
Sure.
Thanks, Mohit. Bala, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Rajiv and Varia for your time. My questions, I've got two questions. One is around the founder matching. We've seen a lot of founders who have worked in the past for many years, and then they decide to start a business. Now, how does the founder matching still work? Because you have known the person for let's say 4 or 5 weeks.
Yep.
And then that was the first question. Let me just quickly do the second one, which is a really short one.
Sure.
So the second one is I've also seen founders where the co-founders have actually been non-tech co-founders. So they're really strong in business, really strong in product, but then they bring on a tech guy at a later stage. What's your view on that?
Sure. So I'll answer the second one first. I think we strongly believe that unless you're building a D2C business, which is you don't need a tech co-founder, we believe that if it's a SaaS business, if it's a consumer tech business, if it's a Web3 business, pretty much in all of these cases today, when you're building a business for the next 5-10 years, technology is going to be a singular differentiator, right? So you need a very strong tech person. Today there are 100 unicorns already, and there are probably 1,000 funded startups. So if you do not have tech as a part of the core culture of your company, at least at Antler, we don't strongly believe that you will be a breakthrough company. Okay. So that's the first thing, which is why we believe that tech is a very strong day one requirement for Antler to fund you as a company. And that's our strong philosophy, right? There's nothing right or wrong about others believing otherwise. On your first one, which is a very fair point, probably out of the 100 unicorns today, maybe 95% of them probably were founders who knew each other for 3 years, 5 years or plus, right? In this decade, we strongly believe for two reasons that things are changing. One, post-pandemic, there's been a lot of people who have been absolutely fine in working with people whom they have either not met ever in the physical world or just do not need to know in the physical world, right? And that's a very new trend. The second is founders have become much younger, okay, which means that it doesn't mean we won't have a 40-year-old founder. It doesn't, that's not the point. But really, we are seeing average founder ages somewhere swing in the 25 to 30, right? Which is, when I started, I was 33. And if you look at, let's say, the last decade, of course, there are big success stories of people who started in the 25, but a lot of the founders were 30 plus, okay? So you would see that change quite drastically this decade, and that audience typically is absolutely fine. Third is there are sectors and themes like Web3 where Antler focuses on quite extensively, right? SaaS, and where usually one founder might even be in a different geography. Okay, where one founder is either the salesperson is based abroad, or when you take the case of a Polygon, or cases like that where one founder is not even Indian, right? And these guys had never even met, right? The last one is Antler ourselves. We have done this now for 4 years across the globe. We have invested in 450 companies, 450, and already there are at least 20 companies which are north of 30, 40 million in valuation. The first two, three companies which have hit $100 million in valuation. And a lot of them are Indian founders, right? Indian founders who moved from India abroad and stuff. Antler was not in India till 1.5 years back. We have seen a huge amount of success stories and ability. So I will end this by saying the whole previous philosophy of that people in your network are the right people to start up with, we believe this decade will be challenged quite extensively. When I say extensively, it doesn't mean that 100% of unicorns and decacorns will become this model. It just means that maybe instead of 95-5, this decade might be 70-30, right? But we believe that that other 30 is what we want to be a big part of for sure through this residency, which is why we also do the pre-seed, which, as I said, we have equal number of companies there which we fund, where you already have your co-founder from your network, right? Which is why we do both models. But the pure purpose of the residency is to say that, hey, we are helping you do this. There is still a chance that things might break up later on. But what we have seen, right, Bala, is the moment people start working together with no baggage, they look at this relationship as a professional one. With every additional success, that relationship bond can get closer, unless your vision, your personality type, your values don't match. Which is why we do a lot of that heavy lifting. So whatever we try to do in those 8 weeks, it's actually an 8 week period where you get to know people before you finalize your co-founder. It's got a humongous amount of value addition and value multiplication that what you would typically do in going through the same in a 6 month period. It is not a 5 year period, it's a 6 month period, which is what we try and accelerate in those 8 weeks. Having said that, of course, there's always risks of people who have come together sort of on a tactical basis, but that's that's par for the course. That's going to happen. There have been founder breakups in the rest of the Antler geographies also. But that's okay, because for every one such, there's also one unicorn that's going to come from people that didn't know. For example, Uber and a bunch of other examples, the founders didn't know each other, right? And of course, this is something that already has some trend lines globally. I think in India, the Indian social cultural context is probably a bit different, which is where what we have done is take 70% from Antler Global and 30% we have done very specific to India. So we are working with very specific people to overlay an India intelligence on making this work. So we do strongly believe that actually you get a better answer by doing this rather than just pairing up with someone in your social network.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Pala.
Great question. Thanks.
There are a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'll go
Sure.
over them. The first is, what was the ideal range of score for one to be ready to take that leap? So of this 10, what number?
Honestly, it's a framework I have come up with. I wish I knew data-wise as to what's the right score. I just strongly believe that, if you look at it as buckets, I think in the first three, you probably should have at least 1.5 to 2, right? If you're not really in the first three, if you're a weak 10 on 30, I do not think you're ready to be a founder, right? Having said that, of course, the rest of it, out of the next 6, maybe you should have at least a 30 out of 60, right? And the last one, anyway, if you're a 0 on it also, I think you will get to a 10 by the end of your entrepreneurship journey. But handling failures, I would say, is something that you should have handled. It just makes it much easier for the journey. So yeah, there is no very specific score. Maybe if I add all of this, maybe you should be trending a 50 to a 60.
Got it.
Yeah.
The next is from Alpha on, is it all right to not have a tech expert engineer in the founding?
So this particular residency is very focused on helping you find your co-founder. So the first 2 weeks, you actually, all the folks come to Bangalore physically. And in those 2 weeks, which will happen between June 20th to July 1st, sometime in those 2 weeks, you will actually get to know each of you in a very social setting, right? So we are actually taking people outside Bangalore, and there's a bunch of events and very specific integrations planned, right? The idea is to understand each other's personality, each other's interests, each other's beyond just the sector that they come in and their pedigree and stuff. After that, the next 6 weeks is where you're actually paired on real life projects around your interest areas with at least five, six of those. Because by the second week, you have probably eliminated at least half the people as being co-founders. And that's the idea, right? You eliminate half to two-thirds as potential co-founders because there's just not a natural fit on personality type. Out of the remaining maybe 8, 10, you try and work with at least 4, 5 where you see a higher probability. And hopefully you land up with maybe, and it's sort of you don't wait, it happens. It happens. In many cases, we have seen it happen in the first month itself. In some cases, we have seen it happen the second month. We keep an additional month's buffer just so that there is a working on the actual product that they're going to build, and to see how that whole presentation happens. Also, Antler trains. So really, there are no other parallel learning tracks. This is purely with the very specific intention of finding a co-founder, which is why you should apply to Antler India Residency. To your other question on if you don't find a tech co-founder in this, and there'll be a few more business people to tech, maybe it's a 60-40 or a 55-45. There is a chance that you find a business co-founder because there is clear complementarity even within it. For example, someone is very strong in sales and someone is very strong in brand. We would look at that also favorably as long as the product that you're building doesn't, or can we have outsourced tech or can have more junior tech. It is possible that we do look at you favorably, just that we do expect most of these cases to find a tech co. For example, if it's a D2C brand, then we do expect someone with strong marketing to pair up with someone with strong customer or product understanding, physical product, right? So we do take those exceptions, not just in D2C, some other categories also, but it is a case by case basis. More default case is that you would probably have to find a tech co-founder.
Got it. The next is around how do you see the funding environment for PMF companies evolving in the next 6 months? Lots of scaremongering around it in popular discourse.
See, the good part is you have also enough literature that says that some of the best companies are built in all these downturns, right? 2008, 2012. You have enough examples in India and globally because the smart founders decide to actually start in a more meaningful environment. If you looked at the last 9 months, between sometime around June, July of last year to March, April of this year, it was mayhem. Anyone could get money, anyone could start up. And in those times, just someone with a better network, with more capital, can just come and irrationally behave and sort of kill what could be a very strong founder who just doesn't have the initial fundraising skills. That will no longer happen, right? Which is good for the smart founder, someone who's just out there to put a lot of effort, obsession around customers, wants to raise enough to build a pre PMF. Those founders, this is the best environment to start up. It's going to be like this for the next 6, 9, 12 months at the least, which essentially means that capital is not going to be as freely available, which is good. The good founders, which is the reason why we launched the residency now and not 3, 6 months back, is because the market was irrational. We wanted to launch it after, of course, Omicron came last quarter, but we are launching it now because now the market is a bit more rational. There is capital at Preseed, there is enough capital at Preseed, but that capital will follow smarter people who are more thought through, which makes it tougher to raise that capital, but that's the whole opportunity.
Got it. I think those are all the questions I can see in the chat. I'll wait for another minute to see if someone has something else. But Rajiv, just a concluding question from my end, which is that, we discuss serendipity and sort of engineering it. And on Network Capital tool, on Network Capital, we have something called the serendipity tool. We love thinking about how you can actually expand your serendipity, how you can do interesting things and share that with a lot of people. And I see this fellowship and this residency sort of enabling a lot of founders to do that as well. Just to sort of conclude today's session, can you just sort of summarize and talk to us a little bit about the kind of serendipity you see happening through the residency? I know there'll be some people who succeed, some people who fail, but I think the overall experience will be valuable. How do you, as you design this residency, look at it?
So, I'll just give an example from a very different perspective, right? There are, we obviously launched Antler around a year and a half back. And in the very first program, which ran between April and June of last year, There were 6 companies we funded, and 13, 14 companies we did not fund. uh, each of those folks have been in touch with all their themselves. Many have become, team members of some other startup. Many have ended up raising capital, even though Antler didn't fund them, and we connected them with many people. We gave good references and stuff. So there's a humongous amount of just, conversations that have, some of them have become best friends and, are doing stuff together. Someone has connected someone to, their first client, even though they had nothing to do with. So this community of 60 people will be some of the sharpest people that you will encounter in your life. People who are ready to be founders, who are building, and that kind of a network, along with the extended Antler support and Antler network, whether that's the globally funded founders or the Antler team members, that is something which, if you can get time and help you in your startup, even if Antler decides to not fund you for whatever reason, I think there is a humongous positive effect. And that is where I will leave you in terms of where we feel that that whole serendipitous thing is going to be extremely important. That it's about being part of a community. I would call it a very specific community thing more than any serendipity or anything else. The reason why we use the word serendipity is you're somewhere architecting the serendipity in this program, right? In terms of you just sort of who you will hit off. Maybe we have some early predictions, out of the 60, but it's somewhere about making sure that you get to meet those people, right? Because we have also some background architecting at some level, which we are supposed to be doing, right? So I think on all of those fronts, you just will be better off in 3 months after this community than prior to it. And that's pretty much it, right? Even if you don't get funded by Antler.